March 17th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting for the Poverty and Homelessness Board of Lane County. I am the chair, Chris McAllister, Lived Experience seat, and I'd like to just have the board members who are present for this committee introduce themselves, and we will go into the agenda and rearranging that. So Commissioner Farr.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners. I am been named the co-vice chair for poverty. To you, Mayor Venus.
Thank you. Lucy Venus, Mayor of Eugene.
Excellent. And is Matthias here?
Yeah, sorry, I was running a little late. Matthias Smith, Homeless Youth Representative.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. And I believe that's all of our current members here. So let's move forward with our agenda, if I may. If there is any jurisdiction updates, we would have time to do that right now.
I guess I could step in quickly. I'm sure you're all tracking this, but we formally closed the temporary urban site at Washington Jefferson yesterday. It now has a fence around it. It's getting ready for the restoration that's needed on that property. And we've moved as many people as we can to designated safe sleep sites. So the 410 Garfield, which is a warehouse with tent sites, really canopies, has opened. And I know that Everyone Village also was able to take a number of the residents who had pets who couldn't move into that warehouse site at 410. So that transition is now happening, and the mask mandate has now been lifted, and so the city is moving back into our enforcement of some of our camping regulations, and that will be gradual because it needs to be gradual, both because of capacity and because of limits in not having safe spots for everybody who is sleeping in our midst. So I think that's probably the biggest update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Farr, do you have any updates, or Matthias?
Yes, just a couple real quickly. First to Mayor Venus, bravo on the remarkable work that the City of Eugene is doing in coordinating all of the many things that are in the pipeline right now. Bravo! It really is in many ways miraculous. It is impressive to watch. Second is that since I'm talking for the entire county, we do have some outside of the metropolitan area county representation here. Councillor Mike Fleck is with us from Cottage Grove, and I wonder, Mike, I don't have anything to say other than in executive session on Tuesday, we discussed real estate for a potential recovery respite crisis center. But I wonder if, Chair, if it's okay for Mike to just give a couple of words about some of the exciting things that are happening in Cottage Grove.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, I'll just reiterate, on April 5th, the city is going to have a town hall meeting. We've been discussing the unhoused population and what we can do to meet the requirements of Martin versus Boise and the new legislative actions, on top of, what else would we like to do. Currently, we're discussing doing a dawn-to-dawn type of shelter down on some property we bought for the extension of our street below the industrial park. We also have some property on North Douglas we're looking at. So that'll be interesting. Hopefully in the next month following that, we'll be making some actions to try to, get some of our folks housed. So I'll let you guys know more after we find out the direction we're going.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. And Mike, a quick question. What's the population of Cottage Grove?
We're just over 10,000. As all of you other elected officials knows, that comes with a lot of baggage, meaning different expectations for TMDLs, and but it also is triggering the changes in our code for development. Of course, we already allowed duplexes in most of our zones, so that really wasn't a heavy lift. But like I said, we're about 10,200 now, if I could guess at it.
Just the point I'd like to make, Councillor, is that Cottage Grove is punching way above its weight class in the response and the positive things that you're doing concerning homelessness and poverty. Congratulations and thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you both Commissioner Farr and Mayor Venice and Councillor Fleck for sharing what's going on in your current jurisdictions. I also know that there's going to be some exciting news from the youth committee coming up in a little bit when we reach quorum. And so I'll let Matthias talk more about that when that time comes. As a point of order, since we cannot vote on our agenda or our consent calendar or the two voting items, can we please move item number 5 forward, the draft financial dashboard?
Chris, we have Sean Van Gordon, Matthias Smith, Pat Farr, Lucy Venice, and so we are, I think, good to go as far as quorum.
Okay, well, thank you for that point of order. Let's, in that case, can I have any comments before we move on the statement of revenue and expenditures or to approve the minutes of January 20th, 2022?
Chair
Anything
McAllister?
that people want to pull up? Yes, sir.
Chair, I move passage of the consent calendar as listed under item 2 on the agenda.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second or will there be discussion regarding the minutes or the acceptance of the statement of revenue?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of, or sorry, is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving the consent calendar and agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, consent calendar agenda carries. Let's, since we have everybody here, let's move on to item number 3, the YHDP Collaborative Community Plan with Susan Lopez and Matthias Smith.
Good afternoon. We also have Jenna Ely presenting with us.
Thanks, Susan. Can everybody see this PowerPoint?
Clear here.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us today. So we are here to present the YHDP Coordinated Community Plan. My name is Jenna Ely. I work for Lane County as a project service coordinator, specifically working with the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project.
I'm Matthias Smith, PHB executive member for homeless youth, and I've been working on this project with them too. And yeah.
And Lopez, I represent the Youth Homelessness Solutions work group as a chair for that committee as part of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and also employed with DHS.
Thanks, Susan. So just as a reminder, Eugene Springfield's Lane County Continuum of Care was chosen last September as one of 33 communities to receive funding through the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project. This is the third cycle of funding that our community has applied for, so third time's the charm as it goes. And we received a total funding allocation of approximately $3.5 million.
The objectives of the YHDP include leading with equity, elevating the leadership of young people, create a coordinated community plan to help unite local efforts, expand existing capacity and pilot new models of assistance, create and enhance cross-system partnerships, and build national momentum around solutions for youth homelessness.
Some of the key elements from this YHDP grant involve development of a coordinated community plan, which is a community-wide plan on preventing and ending homelessness for youth and young adults in Lane County, even beyond the YHDP grant funding. So it included, identifying key system partners and goals, including education, employment, child welfare, and behavioral and physical health folks involved in this coordinated community plan development. And we also, one of the key elements was obvious and important that youth leadership be part of this decision-making body that consists of youth and young adults with lived experience. And also we developed youth executive committee as part of the approving, selecting, and providing feedback for all of these projects that we're going to be talking about today. The YHDP projects are going to be part of this federal funding from HUD, and it is a 2-year grant that's renewable on an annual basis as part of our COC competition. So this will be moving forward as well.
So there's been a lot of folks who have been involved with building out the coordinated community plan and have been sitting around the table. The Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group has acted as our planning team with support from a smaller core team that has met weekly just to make sure that things are flowing correctly and that we are headed in the right direction. There's also a smaller education team compiled of different staff from districts throughout Lane County, as well as McKinney-Vento liaisons. Community partners have been involved in all of these different teams and committees as well. Like Matthias mentioned, we have our Youth Executive Committee, which is made up of 15th Night Youth Action Council members and Looking Glass Play members. And that has been very fun to see that collaboration between those two groups. We also received technical assistance from Corporation for Supportive Housing, True Colors United, National Center for Homeless Education, and those TAs have been walking with us throughout this whole process and in all of our meetings.
Youth engagement was critical to building ideas and writing the CCP. Youth and young people have been involved in all aspects of planning and decision-making. As Jenna mentioned, the Youth Executive Committee is built with representation from 15th Night Youth Action Council and the Looking Glass Play Council. Youth received stipends at a rate of $25 per hour and received technical support from True Colors United. There have been 7 youth consistently involved with input from additional youth when time allowed.
Since receiving the notice of funding in September, we've been convening pretty regularly, and we'll get into ours in the next slide, but the things that we've been working on and we'll go over with you all in just a second are the statement of need, our list of stakeholders and their roles, the mission and vision, the governance structure for this funding, the list of new projects, and obviously signatures for that. So here are some of the hours, and one of the goals that we have over time here is to maybe attach a dollar amount to how much commitment from our community this involved. But we've had a tremendous amount of work put into this project to build our coordinated community plan that we're presenting today. So we've had over 33.5 hours of youth homelessness solution work group meetings, 21 hours of weekly core team meetings, 5 hours of education team meetings, 7.5 hours of youth executive committee meetings, and 26.5 hours of weekend convenings.
So in collaboration with youth leaders and the Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group, we identified this a larger mission and vision statement. And these were some key pieces that our youth wanted to pull out and really honor and highlight at the very beginning of that. So this reads, Lane County Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group believes that a world without youth and young adult housing instability or homelessness is possible if communities work together to listen and lift up youth leaders, voices, ideas, and experiences. We recognize and honor that every youth and young adult is unique, valuable, and an important asset to our community. We firmly believe youth voices should be celebrated with love and solidarity as the experts of their own experiences, and nothing about us without us. So some of the ways that we identified that we can achieve this in this vision include making sure that youth are aware of available services prior to an episode of housing instability or homelessness. Educators, community members, and stakeholders will be coordinated and accessible and will have an understanding of resources for youth. Programs created are individualized. All youth will be treated equitably with dignity and respect. And programs will be strength-based, trauma-informed, and emphasize positive youth development.
So here we have a quote from the letter that youth created, our youth leaders created. Our shared vision is to create supportive and safe environments for youth in Lane County to not only grow, but thrive. As youth leaders, we believe that our voices have a tremendous impact, shaping the inception and execution of our community's plan. And this artwork right here was created by youth leader Mia Longsworth.
So part of our CCP identifies a statement of need, and we're just kind of letting you know all of the areas here in this slide that we have researched and gathered information from to help develop and fill in our coordinated community plan. So obviously HMIS and coordinated entry, our point in time count, our 2019 work from our Youth Homelessness Solutions work group, where we did the Youth Homeless Needs Assessment, Oregon Department of Education, Department of Human Services, Child Welfare and Self-Sufficiency Programs, Juvenile Justice Programs, the 15th Night, Eugene Public Library Teen Center Records, the U.S. Census data, national research, and of course, regional research and data as well. So here's some of the data that was required for us to collect by head. And here are some numbers that attach to that. So we have currently 823 youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, 1,486 youth and young adults at risk for homelessness, 243 youth and young adults pregnant or parenting experiencing homelessness, 133 youth or young adults at risk, pregnant or parenting for homelessness. So additional data that we also collected for our statement of need included information regarding education, employment, LGBTQIA+ youth, youth of color, youth involved in child welfare, youth involved in juvenile justice, and youth survivors of traffic exploitation and or violence. So for the purposes of fitting in with the YHDP definitions, all youth counted are unaccompanied. The statement of need reviews the number of unaccompanied youth and young adults experiencing homelessness in Lane County, and the numbers were calculated mostly using HMIS data.
I see a hand raised, so I want to ask if you want to ask that now or at the end. Give some room.
Just a very quick question that may kind of portend throughout the meeting. You listed your sources of data about 3 slides ago, and I noticed that Looking Glass, which is probably one of the vastest data sources regarding youth in the area, they were not on that list. Was that an omission, or did you not work with Looking Glass?
We included Looking Glass's data in the HMIS count for the programs that they are involved in. So most of their programming is they input data into the HMIS program, and then data that's not collected in HMIS, we did go back and collect that as well.
That is perfect. Thank you very much.
Chris, I also saw you had a hand raised. Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I was just wondering if we could please have this slideshow shared with the mailing list. This is great work.
Yes, we will pass it along to Diana to share out.
Thank you.
So HUD requires, as part of the coordinated community plan, for communities to identify different goals that they would like to achieve throughout the process of YHTP and further. So our community identified 6 goals. And the first one revolves around identifying youth and connecting them to appropriate services. So expanding the number of youth that we are able to count and how we are able to count them and refer them to appropriate services. Using prevention and diversion strategies whenever possible, and when those are not possible, creating a way for youth to be provided immediate access to low barrier crisis housing and services. Our third goal is to create and utilize a youth-specific coordinated entry system or process to effectively be able to connect youth to experiences tailored to their need to meet their needs. Our fourth goal is to act with urgency to be able to assist youth with moving into a variety of housing options, including non-time limited, permanent housing options, and time limited housing. So things like transitional housing. Our fifth goal is to increase system capacity. So developing resources and plans to increase that capacity to ensure that episodes of youth homelessness are short and non-repeating. And our sixth and final goal, excuse me, is to increase educational engagement and income generation amongst youth experiencing homelessness. So helping them identify and build skills to be able to exit homelessness and remain stable. And to help prioritize the action steps that fall under all of these goals, we are able to identify a timeline for each action step. So we have 3 different grouping of timelines: our short-term action steps, which we would like to see implemented within the next 12 months, medium-term action steps, which we would like to see implemented within 12 to 36 months, and then long-term action steps that we would like to see sometime within the next 5 years.
Regarding the governance, this is an infographic that represents the current structure of our governance. And I want to emphasize that youth leaders are at the top of the structure, exempling the importance of starting with them and information being trickled down.
So we just wanted to recognize over 30 providers came to the table throughout this long process that we've been engaged in for development of our coordinated community plan. We have them listed here on the screen. I don't know that you all need me to read through, but you can absolutely see that. There was a lot of community commitment and engagement.
So before we jump into the specific projects that we identified as wanting to fund, I want to share a timeline of where we are at and what really comes next after these projects are funded. So we are currently in the process of routing the coordinated community plan for signatures. And once we have all necessary signatures, we will be routing that to HUD for approval. And that should happen within the next week or week and a half. And then our Youth Executive Committee is currently working with our Lane County administrative team to build out RFPs or requests for proposals. So that is very exciting that our youth get to be a part of that process and determining what questions agencies are asked and the criteria for who will get those funding sources. So April through June, we'll have the procurement and development of projects. And then in July, between July and September, projects will begin implementation. So all the funds need to be obligated by September of 2022.
So our proposed projects, the Youth Executive Leader, in partnership with the Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group, participated in multiple meetings to discuss projects our community can best utilize with the YHDP funds. The group came to the decision that these 4 projects should be funded with support services only, SSO projects, host homes as SSOs, a joint transitional/rapid rehousing program, and HMIS capacity expansion.
So when we're talking about supportive services projects only, these projects will be refined obviously during the competition process based on applicant responses, but these projects can include drop-in services, outreach services, youth navigators, and the desired outcomes are listed here with increased outreach for youth in rural communities. Youth in imminent risk of homelessness are diverted prior to an episode of homelessness. Decrease in the number of youth experiencing homelessness. Youth experiencing homelessness will be quickly identified and connected to appropriate supports. Increased collaboration between youth services and child welfare to bridge gaps and to divert youth from future episodes of homelessness. And so with this, the process that we're in right now is still sort of conceptual in that we don't have actual projects funded or selected, obviously, but we project that the number of youth that will serve through these objectives could be 50 to 125 youth annually. And so the projected cost range for that would be between $200,000 and $500,000.
The second project that we are hoping to fund is a host homes project, and we would fund this as a supportive service only project, which means that there will be short-term immediate placement options for youth, and it also gives ability for agencies to provide stipends to families who are hosting youth. So some of our desired outcomes for host homes include increasing the availability of host homes in different geographical regions throughout Lane County, decreasing the number of youth experiencing homelessness, and having shorter lengths of time that they will spend homeless. And then youth will be successfully housed with client-informed move-on strategies to transitional or permanent housing. Knowing that host homes are not the end goal, but there's permanent housing after that. And again, our projected number of youth to serve annually is 28, and the projected cost for 1 year is $250,000.
A joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing program will be low barrier and youth-centered while addressing the immediate housing needs of youth and young adults, with an option to transfer from transitional housing to rapid rehousing. This is a new type of project for Lane County. Some of the desired outcomes include increase the number of youth housed independently, decrease recidivism rates of youth homelessness, support youth in developing skills to maintain housing, and connect youth with existing community supports and equip them with tools to achieve self-sufficiency and remain housed. The projected number of youth to serve annually is between 27 and 45, and the projected 1 year cost is between $600,000 and $1 million.
So our fourth and final project that we are hoping to fund is HMIS capacity expansion. So we recognize that our YHDP projects will almost double our continuum of care portfolio, which means that we also need to increase our HMIS capacity. So the Youth Executive Committee and Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group agreed to set aside funding specifically for this, with the hopes that we'll have a few different outcomes of one, increasing capacity on our data management team to meet the different tracking needs of new YHDP projects, improvements in data collections, an increase and improved participation in HMIS from agencies around Lane County. And that is our fourth and final project that we will be funding.
All right.
Go for it, Susan.
Oh, yeah. So at this point, we just would like to request the executive committee to make a formal vote to approve the coordinated community plan as developed by our youth and young adult leaders and our YHDP planning groups, and move this forward to HUD for approval.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm going to, before I answer to that request, I'd like to open up for our executive members to ask any questions or get some further feedback. I will ask my questions at the end of the queue. So I'd like to invite Commissioner Farr to speak first.
You're muted.
You know, I should tell you I was singing and you missed it. I'm sorry. I was going to make a motion, Chair, but I'll wait for your call on that. Just a quick question in the meantime. Following this vote, does it need to go to through the Human Services Commission, or does it go directly to HUD after this vote?
After this vote, we will be finished collecting the signatures that are required, and then it will go directly to HUD.
Directly to HUD. Excellent. So this is the vote of approval. Superb. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Venus.
Yeah, I just really wanted to thank you for this report, and the numbers are really awful, right? 883 currently homeless youth in our county is really a very frightening number. And I think as we think about the number of adult homeless we have in our community, this is where it starts. If we don't start to help teenagers and young adults find more stability, then they're at risk of not finding stability later in life. So I actually really appreciate this work, and I appreciate how thoughtful the 4 projects are and how they're building capacity. I guess and maybe I should know from reading this, comparing the numbers, and I know how this is, the projection is to serve annually, something over 100 youth, and the count is something over 8, almost 900 youth. So just wondering how you're seeing that over time. Will this build capacity for these kinds of services to grow over time?
I mean, Jenna, I don't know if I can jump in. I think obviously we would hope that through the use of this funding, we could also leverage other resources within our community, or invite other community partners to maybe join us in these efforts as well. And so we're definitely hoping that this gives some momentum in the right direction within our community, to make some longer strides here. We're obviously, limited by the amount of funding that we're able to provide to these projects, but absolutely, once we start developing some of these programs, if they see great success, I think it would be an opportunity to share that information within our community so that other programs can expand in those areas as well. I hope that answered your question.
Mayor Van Gordon.
So thank you. Can you just help me get my head around it? That when you talk about the youth that are impacted by this plan, it is the HUD definition of homelessness. This doesn't include the McKinney-Vento kids that the school district would track that may still be housed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought, and I think it's valuable, right? In a way that is not necessarily made to influence this plan, to really just sort of acknowledge that this plan's only covering a tiny slice of what the overall need of kids that are sort of at risk in this community, and that includes Springfield, Eugene, and the Bethel school districts. The one comment that I had is when I see with how much in the way of funds are going into sort of human services in general, right? Like I see the projects here as, again, sort of another expansion. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out how does that tie to everything else we're actually trying to do, so that, in a county where we have limited capacity, right? We hear those updates every single day. Like, can you help me maybe jump from the nature of this plan to how it sort of ties off to everything else we're sort of growing and expanding in this space?
I guess for me, that feels like a really big high level question. I mean, I think everywhere, we're all targeting the areas that we can influence. And so, as the Youth Homelessness Solutions Work Group, we've been working for the last 4 years on really trying to come together and coordinate services and really build those connections within the youth and young adult homeless programs around Lane County to really try to begin to build some inroads and collaboration. So I think this is just another piece of like a small slice of the huge, social issue that is homelessness in our community. And so I think this fits in a very poignant way, in that this is what our youth and young adults with lived experience in our community have identified as the best way to support them with the funding that we have here. So for me, this is an opportunity for us to implement a bit of change management at the grassroots level.
Yeah, so I think one comment for you guys as a folks, and then one comment for the rest of the board. The comment for the work group, right, really is, right, like there is a lot of money being, coming into sort of human services in this, and it's not even close to meeting what the need is. And I would just keep encouraging you guys as a work group to sort of look to the left, look to the right, and figure out how to sort of tie off, what you're doing to a more holistic end-to-end view about how the actual systems, the system's working. And that's not based on the plan at all. That's simply based on the conversations that, on Tuesday, Lucy and I we're at Home Consortium having this same very conversation. And I think it's not incumbent on all of us to kind of almost come up 2 levels and just keep asking, like, are we moving forward with this sort of this strategy that is going to actually move this forward? The only other thing I had, and it's kind of a nitpicky comment, but, I think it's really important when you engage leaders to be a little bit, the governance structure. When you guys kind of flashed that up, I went, wait a minute, I didn't go back go back and see, see that piece. And I understand how people have gotten to that. I would ask that you sort of correct, the way that it came across to me is that we really wanted to take the youth leaders and sort of implement what they wanted from a feedback perspective. And I think that is a good way to look at it. But if you could sort of restructure that slide to just sort of acknowledge that the board's role and the elected leaders' role is they may not say yes to everything, right? That they, that the elected boards that kind of go through this aren't necessarily going in those top-down graphics. I always read it as when they want it, they're going to get it. And I don't know that is actually the case. I think you can structure it in a way to say, hey, we should put heavy deference. We should listen to people that have exposed through this. But I think, you're engaging leaders sometimes for the first time. And we have to just kind of be real about, where the decision points are. And
yeah, I guess I would also like to address that specific point. The funding for this specific grant, the youth vote is actually the most important point of this grant, and HUD will not fund it if the youth vote is not supported. And so there have been communities, I believe, I might be speaking out of turn, that has not necessarily gone the way, and that funding was not supported by the youth. That was asked for by some of the other leadership. And so that's why we structured that infographic the way we did, because the purpose of this funding is to be youth-led. And the design of this funding was to make sure that youth voice was the most important piece of this project.
And I completely understand where you guys are going for it. But if this body said no, right, it wouldn't go forward, right?
Yeah.
And if the county commission said no, it wouldn't go forward, right?
Correct. And if they sent it back to the youth and the youth said no, it would not go forward. So yeah, it is more linear at this point.
Right. And I'm not trying to kind of pull you guys into it. I'm just like, I want to balance the conversation that says it definitely isn't, it isn't maybe top down, maybe some pieces are an equal vote. But when I heard it, what I heard was, hey, whatever they write the plan is, right? Like everybody's implementing it. And I just sort of, government structures are hard, and I want to make sure we keep those kids engaged in the right way to say that, hey, look, we're all doing checkpoints along the way and we're all rowing the same way. So take the feedback for what it's worth. It's just something that popped out when I listened to the presentation. But I'm comfortable going forward here.
Thank you, Mayors Van Gordon and Venus, and Commissioner Farr will be momentarily issuing this motion request. I wanted to say, as a homeless youth who was able to utilize community resources that do not exist currently in the format that they were to get me off the streets, and I've been off the streets for 15 years now. I'd like to say that I'm very, very much supportive of both this model, of this approach, and of the county attentions that are being put into it. One thing I want to kind of shore up with kind of looking at our rural and our smaller towns, a lot of our homeless youth is represented in Eugene. That's where our county seat is. That's where a lot of our stuff is. But I would like to make sure that as we move forward as a committee, that we don't forget our brothers and sisters and others who are in Veneta, in Cottage Grove, in Florence, in Mapleton, in Drain. Well, no, Drain's a little bit farther, sorry. But again, these are where our homeless people are. These are where our communities are floundering. And so as long as we're looking at projects that consider that. Also was just curious about what core competencies are y'all expecting from people to come and do this kind of work? What are there any specific studies that y'all are really anchoring towards in addition? I saw the slides, I couldn't go back and look at them, so I was going to reference my question with that. One final part is I wanted to say that this county has been very progressive and frontline when it comes to raising youth issues. Approximately 2004, I believe, 2003, there was Out of the Shadows, a study where we became the first state to really acknowledge that homeless youth is our responsibility as a community and as a state. And so I really just want to say that this work has started. and continues to flourish in this county. And I'm so proud of what our people are doing. So thank you to the youth and thank you to the process.
Chris, I just want to hop in and answer your question. And first say too that I think you're absolutely right in bringing our folks who are in rural communities. We've had a lot of representation from folks over in Florence, Sayusla area, as well as Cottage Grove throughout the process, which has been very exciting. And so I'm glad that you brought that point up. And we're in conversation right now, especially with our youth executive committee, about identifying those core competencies for agencies that we would like to see. So that is a process that they are working on building out alongside our admin team. And those are questions that we've had all along the way of this process of identifying what those core competencies are throughout conversations of all those 90+ hours of meetings that has been at the forefront. So it's definitely something that our youth executive leaders are thinking about and have in the back of their mind. And we'll continue with that process of building out the RFPs.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna, for that. And as those competencies are identified, you know what, I just like to implore the county to make sure that people understand what they are or where they might learn more about them, especially if they're going to be implemented in how we staff and how we service these grants. So thank you very, very much for this hard work to this committee, this work group. And I'd like to move to Commissioner Farr for his comment.
First, thank you, Chair McAllister, for your voice of experience that lends so much to this conversation. Thank you. And I'll look at you first, Donna Butera. I was in Ms. Witten's kindergarten class at Meadowview School just this morning. And the pain in your heart when you look around those faces, knowing that potentially some of those little faces in that room are suffering from housing insecurity, homelessness, and some of the tragedies that surround poverty. You see them daily, Donna Butera. Chair McAllister, we firmly believe youth voices should be celebrated with love and solidarity as the experts in their own experiences. We firmly believe that. With that, Chair, I'd like to move the coordinated community plan to prevent and end may I say that again, please? The coordinated community plan to prevent and end youth homelessness. I'd like to move that with our approval forward to the next step.
Second.
Is there, who was the second?
Lucy Venus.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Commissioner Farr and Madam Mayor for this motion and the second. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor of moving this forward, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, Jenna and team. Jenna, Susan, and Matthias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great work. So now on to the next item on the agenda. Here, pulling it up real quick. We currently have.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I thought I was going to introduce myself, Chris. This is Lisa.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa. The floor's yours.
Hi, everybody. And this is Lisa Stewart. I work as a senior management analyst and supervisor of the data and analytics team for the Human Services Division. And I am going to do a really brief presentation on the Data and Analytics Subcommittee Charter, which we're asking for approval. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's cool with everyone. There we go. So if you can let me know if you see something up there that says Data and Analytics, thank you. Near the end of your packet, you'll find that there is the charter in for the Data and Analytics near the back. So what this committee will provide is oversight and support of the data and analytics team and the work of being the HMIS lead for the continuum of care. The committee will address two major areas. One is, does our system meet local needs? And that's not just of the county, but of all the participating partners and stakeholders. And are we meeting our federal funding partner expectations and requirements? So what will the committee do? HUD expects that we will have a functioning oversight body that will focus on 8 areas. That's planning, programmatic decisions, technical decisions, software selection, funding, such as recommending a fee schedule for user licenses, management and implementation of strategies, operating procedures and protocols, data utilization, and governance. Fortunately, HUD does provide a detailed outline of this structure that they're looking for that the committee can use as a template moving forward. They're not all required, but that's the recommendation. So the folks who would potentially be on the committee would be case managers, focusing on data sharing issues, client interactions in relation to HMIS policies, use of the software for case planning, and particular issues concerning front-end users of HMIS. Then there's program managers who will focus on issues of program planning, management, evaluation, staff management, and the interagency data sharing agreements. Then we have policymakers like you guys, focused exclusively on policy issues relating to budget issues like those fees, confidentiality, data sharing, HMIS use, HMIS access, and data ownership. And then there's technology and research specialists focused on the advanced technical design issues and research methods that are often beyond the capacity of many or experience of many of the human service providers that use our system. So as I was thinking about it, some of the potential partners who are not currently engaged with our HMIS are U of O law students who could assist us with policy development and data sharing agreements and those legal pieces that we always need assistance on. Look to the U of O School of Business students to assist us with business analysis for the county and for the participating providers. Are we meeting our business needs? We could engage local research groups to assist with data collection and interpretation issues. And technology professionals, not just in Lane County, but nationwide, to assist with vendor evaluation, best practice models for data presentation and utilization. So there's a lot of opportunities. Oh, and I don't want to forget, we also want to engage other divisions within our own county in the Health and Human Services, making sure that our data are available in whatever correct format for those other divisions to utilize. Looking at who is receiving behavioral health services, who is also on our homeless by name list, or who is at risk of losing housing, making sure that we always make our data available when appropriate. So the committee can accomplish great things, in my opinion. They can help build community consensus on the HMIS vision by improving messaging, sharing digestible information on poverty and homelessness in Lane County. And they can also help us manage expectations of the deliverables from HMIS and the other associated systems that we utilize. And they can identify the critical issues in existing systems and address any redesign or improvements that are needed. And that would be, for example, using the system to reduce redundant intake processes, streamlining referral processes that are done within the system or in our adjacent systems, simplifying reporting processes, improving information to guide resource allocation and policymaking, and finally, modeling a system that provides clarity and transparency on the information, decision-making, and structures it uses. So what I put up on the board, the virtual board, is just a draft of what that oversight work plan would look like. That would be actually developed by the committee, but this is something for them to respond to get us going, and how we would take a look at that quarterly and be able to use that information to pivot, make changes, do improvements, identify some hot areas that really need our attention. So it'll be very structured for that group to be able to function and move forward. Can I answer any questions before you move on?
I'm looking at the queue. Mayor Venice and then Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you, Lisa, for this. It sounds very, it sounds like it would really strengthen the system. Maybe you said this in the beginning. Is this a new requirement of HUD that we have this, or is this a local recognition that we need to have a more robust process for looking at our data and our data collection?
We've always had a committee. We had a dedicated committee up until a few years ago. Then we shared a committee. But it is a local recommendation that we have a stronger committee because of the work that is in front of us and the lack of having a group that can really do this evaluation and improve our process and our system. We can do that from within all day long, but it really is good to have outside eyes and professionals looking at this with us.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Van Gordon?
All right, thank you. So got a couple of questions here. One of them is would this committee be thinking about where sort of where reporting is going to go into the future, right? So I feel like when it comes to sort of analytics in general, right, we're sort of always off of our back foot at the county, right? Like we're getting caught up and stuff looks great. Like you guys are doing a great job with it, but right, like I think there's a conversation about what's the next 5 years look like? What's the next 10 years look like? Where are we actually marching towards? Is that someplace
Absolutely.
on the work plan?
Oh, absolutely. Because right now we're in crisis response mode, and we have been for a while. It's like whenever that squeaky wheel gets loud enough, then we'll try to redirect resources to provide that report, that information, that visualization. But what we want is a plan that helps us guide our directions. What kind of skills do we need? What are we looking for? What's the priority? How does the community going to digest that? How do we need to present that? So yeah, it is really that planning and the direction that our team needs. And that will also help us manage expectations about what we can do, when we can do it, and what resources we would need to accomplish it.
And how does it link to the provider capacity conversation? And the reason I'm asking is, right, like we've got that as a particular issue out there. And if we execute on the data piece very well, it should make the capacity sort of be a release valve for capacity when it comes to the service providers.
I hope it removes a lot of barriers that the providers experience in trying to, they do enter their data and they do the best they possibly can, but are they able to then use that data, their own data themselves, to move their projects forward, make their own decisions? And is it easy to do? Is it understandable? And that's guidance that we're really looking for. We have ideas, but we want that structure, and we don't want to tell the agencies what they need. We want the agencies to tell us what they need and have this committee parse through that and determine how we're going to prioritize it.
I'm going to have a controversial opinion. I'm not 100% sure that people know what they need, right? Because I think, right, you're balancing this sort of technology with sort of the operational output, and just sort of like pulling one of them in, those people that know how to do their job really well, that are the subject matter experts, into a committee like this to talk to people about data would do wonders. And this world is always a challenge, because you have to sort of boil it up or build it in such a way that people can actually show them how they can take action on it, because good operators and leaders in the world that they know, sometimes just like their head is, you're teaching them a new muscle, right? About how to use this data and use it wisely. So I would just be open that, they're probably still curious too about what's available and how do you construct it in a way that helps them.
Yes, thank you. It's these kinds of questions, Mayor, that make me really hope you want to be on this committee.
The truth of Edward Stemming. Good job.
Vice Chair, Brittany.
Yeah, thanks. some of the questions I had were already asked. I appreciate Mayor Van Gordon bringing up the capacity issue with some of the nonprofits, because that's like one of the glaring things that we heard when we were doing a bunch of like these conversations in the community was the data is not 100% where it needs to be, but also the like extra burden on nonprofits to get the data in there is like, it's not sustainable, right? There's not a lot of like funding mechanisms and or even like incentive for those nonprofits to put a bunch of time into it because they can't get the data back out themselves. So I'm glad you touched on that, Lisa. I think that's one thing that we heard from several different nonprofits is like, I want to be able to use the data. If I have to put all my time into getting it in there, like I want to get it back out so I can use it too. And that even that much, I think would incentivize nonprofits to like put their time into it. I'm curious. So when I was volunteering, I think the last Egan warming activation, I picked an overnight shift, and I feel a little bit sorry for Jeff Wolf with St. Vincent de Paul, who was the intake specialist that night. We'd never met, and I just was like over his shoulder, like, oh my gosh, tell me everything you know. And he basically had to sit through like a 4-hour interview with me asking a million questions about putting data into the system and how it works and what his like feedback is on it. But then he told me that he was also on a committee that they were doing this work. So I'm curious, like, are those things connected to this? I've also heard that the University of Oregon students have been doing some deep diving into the HMIS system. So I just want to make sure that like we're connecting all these things back together, if this is the place where that's going to live.
So there is an agency administrator group that meets monthly, and they advise on, they are the bridge between this system and clients. That is their role. They develop the scripts for the privacy statement that we read to each new client that comes in. They identify snags in the system. We provide support to help them identify workflow. But I will say that we don't hear a lot of these issues. They don't come to us. So we're trying to develop communication with folks that make them comfortable coming to us with their challenges. Like, they can't get data out. Well, they actually can. They just need to be trained and be pointed to the report they need. So we're trying, that is the committee that does that kind of work. And the U of O, they kind of got off to a slow start with HMIS. They're looking at a very high level look at it. It is not something that will inform this work. Okay. But I think it's really good for the students. It's a student project that they're working on, but we have only just talked to them the first time 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah. I guess a small piece onto that. So kind of along the lines of what Mayor Van Gordon said, my hope is that if we're going to ask people to sit on this committee, that we're open to hearing about the good, the bad, the ugly. Because I feel like if we're actually going to move it forward, like we can't just be stuck in the way we've been doing it. And I like this like concept of looking 5 years out. Like if this system isn't working for a lot of people and it takes a lot to get stuff out of it, like how are we being critical about, is this the right system for us, et cetera? And I know there's like federal rules, we got to use it, et cetera. The other piece that I want to just add in there. So I'm glad you mentioned having some technology professionals. I think that we need to engage the private sector in this conversation. They're using data all the time in the work that we're doing. And I think that's a great sort of tie-in to like bring in some like innovative data specialists who maybe work with other systems that could provide some ideas or suggestions.
Absolutely.
And then I would also add, and this is something I know I've harped on this before, but I would love to see some communications folks in this conversation too, because I think we can get a lot of good data, but if we cannot put that data back out to the community in a way that they can digest it, then I feel like we're missing a massive part of the equation. And that is like bringing people hope and making sure that they know we're working on this stuff by being able to show them that the data is going in the right direction. So I know I've said it before, but I feel like bringing communications folks into that in the development, so then they know how to communicate it well too.
That's great. Thank you. I just added that to my list that I hadn't thought about that before, about that particular skill set, but that's absolutely what we're looking at when we're talking about how we present the data. Is it digestible? Is it usable? Messaging? That is their world. Thank you. And about the whether this is good, bad, or ugly, that is exactly what we're looking for in the evaluation. Because yes, we do have to use an HMIS model, which means it has to meet the HUD standards for that vendor, has to meet the HUD standards for how the tables are structured and a bunch of other stuff. But it doesn't have to be this vendor. It could be any vendor that meets those expectations plus our local needs. And so that's what we want to do is we want to have every year that we evaluate how is this system managing our needs, both the county's needs and the participating providers. We can address that with the vendor. And if the vendor doesn't provide us with satisfactory information, then we can move on to another step of looking for having an RFP. And we do have support at the county to do that. We have a business analyst assigned to our division, to this team specifically already. And if it comes to that, which nobody wants it to, because as everybody knows, shifting softwares is very painful. But if it's the best thing to do, and it gets us to a better place because this community is starting to rely heavily on data, then we need to do it.
Thank you very much, Brittany and Mayor Van Gordon, Mayor Venice. I support this idea. I just have two quick questions, and then we need to do a vote and then move on to a couple quick items before we close out. As someone who really supports the data, knowing that sometimes it's not necessarily the software, but are the right questions being asked and answered. At one point, there was hesitation for this body to add more committees, saying that we already have too many, we have people stretched out. Can this not be put into, say, the HMIS committee? Or because the fact that it's talking about systems outside of it, does it not fit as a subcommittee of some sort? We keep being told to build in, not out, infill, not spread. So that's my first question real quick. Is there any reason why it wouldn't be added?
Well, this would replace the HMIS piece of the HMIS subcommittee.
Okay. And so that would just be
and maybe Amanda can speak to what that committee's other roles are and how that would be managed.
But if we have 2 minutes on this topic, otherwise I think that we need to move forward on the nonprofit stuff. So
okay.
Amanda, would you like to speak to that real quick?
Yeah, just really briefly, I don't think we have a solid vision kind of developed yet in terms of the other pieces of that committee. It was the RFP eval HMIS committee before, so this is sort of breaking off that HMIS piece into a separate group. As most of you probably remember, that group has several different things under it, and so it got a little bit convoluted. And so I think we'll really look at that group for the moment to just handle those continuum of care tasks and process items that are really required, like the COC ranking, evaluation of COC projects, all of those things that it's already doing. But as we go forward with more strategic planning and other discussions, we might reevaluate what that committee holds under it and how it's structured. But for the moment, it will just continue to hold those other COC pieces that are remaining.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I will yield my questions for when staff are further developed on this, but I'm okay with seeking a motion to consider this. Is there anybody who would like to make the motion?
I'll go ahead and move. Lucy Venice, I'll move to approve this creation of this new subcommittee.
Is there a second? Okay, folks, do we want to have more discussion on this? Do we want to revisit this at another agenda?
I think
I'll second.
Yeah, I think there was a second.
Okay, awesome. So motion moved by Mayor Venice and seconded by Mayor Van Gordon. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any noes, please signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Lisa, for this important work, and look forward to hearing more about how we're going to utilize this. Miss Kate Budd, would you please talk to us about capacity?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Some of you may be aware that there was a nonprofit nonprofit capacity building listening session that was held a few weeks ago. And nonprofits from throughout Lane County were invited, whether they were Lane County contractors or not. And the conversation really revolved around three focus areas. One being, what capacity building needs does your agency have? What training needs does your agency have? And then also, what needs do you have around program evaluation? And the reason for this listening session was that the county has been able to receive ARP funds, both from the federal government as well as from the state. And the Board of County Commissioners very kindly allocated a portion of those ARPA funds to capacity building focused on nonprofits in the community. And so before we started using those dollars, we wanted to make sure that we had a strong handle on what are the needs and challenges that our local nonprofits are seeing, and how we might help address those needs through these ARPA funds that are allocated for capacity building. So I just wanted to share some of the feedback that was received, and then I'll also talk about next steps for those ARPA funds. What really came through those listening sessions included needing dollars for the purchase of programs or software, like the potential of a data system, an HR or payroll data system for nonprofits, one-time costs for the purchase of equipment, so tablets, laptops, computers, cell phones, all those important things when it comes to doing business these days, as well as a real interest in consulting services, such as support around human resources and the needs around recruitment, retention, workplace wellness, and the development of new or revised policies that help increase the recruitment and retention and wellness of staff. Consulting around payroll support and how to make that as efficient as possible, especially as nonprofits grow. Around internal auditing and finances, that came up quite a bit, especially because nonprofits in some cases have more money than they ever have, and may now be open to new auditing requirements that they previously didn't need to follow before COVID. Grant writing was another strong interest, recognizing that there are grant opportunities, but the nonprofits within their administrative staff may not have the capacity to turn their attention to those grant opportunities. Workflow process development and updates were also mentioned. Facilitating equity assessments and creating equity-related plans were also mentioned. And then creating informal, both informal and formal opportunities for translation, whether it's through written form or videos of ASL interpretation, and making sure that the languages are diverse and that it may not center just on Spanish, for example, that there's many languages that nonprofits can translate their material into. And so really great ideas were shared and will be a part of the grant opportunity that we'll be offering in the next few weeks. When we looked at training opportunities, what came out was the opportunity for DEI training for staff and participants, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, trainings for supervisors, the ability to attend national, state, and local conferences, and also to be a part of train the trainer courses, so that that builds the capacity for additional training that can be offered here in our community. We also know that with the YHDP grant that's coming in, positive youth development, for example, will absolutely be a training need, as well as providing trauma-informed care is a consistent need, as well as de-escalation techniques. I appreciate Brittany's point regarding private sector solutions. I think that very much will be key as we seek out, how do we connect our nonprofits with contractors who can help support them, and how do we work to make sure that that support is individualized to the needs that we have here in the community. And of course, if it's someone in the community, that's a greater opportunity to make sure that happens. And then lastly, evaluation was the last question. And one of the opportunities is just learning how to pull reports from HMIS. And that's something that the county can definitely help to offer. But also the ability to do evaluation internally within nonprofits was something else that they were interested in. So I appreciated that idea. And so as far as next steps, there are some things, particularly around trainings and evaluation, that the county itself can help to facilitate, and we'll continue with planning around that. But we also want to make sure that grant opportunities go out to nonprofits locally. And so we'll be doing that through an RFP process where nonprofits can share how they envision utilizing these capacity building funds. And we'll make sure that the recommendations that we collected from that listening session are built into the RFP as allowable costs related to those grants. So we're excited. This is an amazing opportunity to help support our incredible nonprofits here in Lane County. And we're just going to be, working to get those dollars out and to move these opportunities forward as quickly as we can, and hopefully see some market opportunities that the nonprofits are going to take into their current challenges, and then continue to address future challenges as well. Any questions about the feedback that we received from the nonprofits or the future RFP?
Kate, I'd just like to know, when did this meeting happen? Was there going to be any other listening tours? Because I just reached out to about 5 nonprofits who said they didn't know about it. So I want to make sure that everybody who's, especially the service providers doing current products, would be able to give their feedback and input into it as well. Is there going to be any other ways to contribute before decisions are made or things are weighed in?
So at this point, the opportunity for feedback is closed. Because we're moving forward with the RFP, we had to have a final date. We definitely sent out the invitation through all our PHB listservs and distribution lists. If you have particular nonprofits that you heard from and want to send them to me, I'd be glad to cross-reference and see if someone from the nonprofit attended. We did have very good attendance, over 50 folks at the listening session, and then other nonprofits that filtered in feedback after the listening session.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot of our people are doing a lot of the work, and so sometimes there's perception that we receive the emails or listservs, but even with, especially with COVID times, emails is one of the worst ways to be in communication with people who are doing the hard work. So I do appreciate you being able to get that many people in and of that yourself. So thank you very much for this. Will you be giving a report at the next PHB meeting about where this has gone, or this give an update when this moves to the next steps?
We certainly can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions regarding this topic?
Yeah.
I see Mayor Venice.
We got a whole lineup here of folks. So,
okay.
So I'll be brief. I just wanted to mention that I've had a number of conversations with LCOG and with Noreen Dunnels at United Way around this capacity building question. And one of the ideas that we've been floating is that whether there could be a sort of a centralized administrative support nonprofit for a lot of these smaller nonprofits, so that you would, instead of each one going through a training process and developing their capacity to do all of these HR and other things, that they would actually be a membership of a shared organization that would do that on their behalf, so that there would be some economies of scale. And so Kate, I just wanted to alert you to that conversation and that possibility, because it would be sort of the way LCOG provides that kind of services to smaller city governments, that kind of model. And I think we just came out of Brittany's most wonderful economic summit, and one of the facts in that economic summit was that we have a kind of a disproportionate number of nonprofits doing work in this community. And so it feels to me that part of strengthening them might be a consolidation of some of those administrative HR kinds of functions, so that they use their capacity to really deliver the services, which is really what their strength is. So I would just like to make sure that as this moves forward, that conversation doesn't get lost.
I appreciate that, and actually just got an email from United Way today, and I thank anyone that may have precipitated that, and glad to reach out to LCOG as well.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Okay, so I'm going to second what Lucy said by about $1 million. And then, and even though I'm ahead of Brittany, the comment that she made, I think is right on point. I think this is good work. It is great work. I'm still sort of curious to learn more, because the more I learn, the more sort of I kind of have a million questions here. And I think when it is easy in business, in nonprofits, to say, list all the things you should be doing. And if nonprofits are anything like everything else in between government sector and in the private sector, everybody is either at capacity, is turning people over, addressing cost issues. And the number one issue that I hear people talk about is the cost to retain employees. And additional training and programs and support isn't going to help unless you sort of help them immediately with the idea of how do you keep the employees to keep operating, because they're sort of stuck in the sort of blue brain piece of, I just got to keep the lights on, right? You can't get better until you get past I'm just operating in a place to keep the lights on. So I would love to learn more, have longer conversations. I hope we can simplify this for them instead of giving them a lot of options, is really boil this down into phases, right? Like phase one, if we can just make sure, address whatever the issue is and I'm gonna guess that it's probably around pay, that is causing people to turn over employees. And then we can kind of move on to these higher sort of acuity, business acumen, whatever term you want to call it, sort of issues. We got to do this in a way that makes sense. I think there's some great ideas floating around there. I would love to learn more about what folks are thinking, but this is good work. It just got to get organized a little more.
Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon. Vice Chair Brittany Quickwater, then Vice Chair Pat Farr.
I think Pat was actually before me.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pat.
Okay.
Thank you, Brittany. Really quickly, I'll throw out some numbers for a second, but first, what Mayor Venus is talking about is the discussion, is the parallel to the discussion that we had at the Human Services Commission close to a year ago. Chris, you may remember that discussion because you were a part of it, where we talked about ESD-like services for nonprofits, which would include shared, the way ESDs provide counseling to smaller school districts, for instance, provide training, provide perhaps even a central warehouse for some of the supplies that nonprofits need. That's all a part of that discussion. But just very quickly, I'll throw out the numbers that Kate Budd was mentioning. Apart from the $34 or so million that Lane County's ARPA funds are going to homelessness and housing, there's $5.4 million in aid to nonprofits, including homeless service provider network capacity building and other things. That's the money we're talking about right there. And that's all I have. Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate. And back to you, Brittany.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple of the points I was going to make were made. Great. I appreciate that. Kate, I feel like I would love to connect with you on some of these things. The chamber model is exactly like for private businesses and nonprofits. Like we have people can access cheaper health insurance, like via chamber, like resource, things like that, that I feel like we're doing. I'm not saying that that's a resource, but like, I would love to make sure to not have people recreate the wheel. We can give them resources, advice, like, here's how we could do this. Here's what we did to do that. Like, so I want to be helpful in that way. If it would be, same thing with access to some of those different types of training. We provide that a lot for small businesses already. And I can tell you as a nonprofit myself, I have all the same sort of issues that a lot of these nonprofits are having with benefits and pay and competitiveness and all those things. So I think I want to use the resources we already have and just like shift them or scale them to be a good resource for nonprofits too, if it's appropriate. So I'm just putting that out there as like, I'm super willing to help think through if we can get things done faster, because we might have the start of it already just needs to be retooled a little bit. So, but I think it's desperately needed, and I'm glad you're having that conversation. Chris, did we lose you?
Well, I just say I really appreciate the feedback and the creative ideas. I think the fact is that we want to, meet again in 2 years and have known that these dollars helped to build capacity among our nonprofit partners. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I want to make sure that I respect the interests of nonprofits who really are just saying like, give us some dollars so we can do what we need to do. And how do we help to build those connections for others that really are looking for partnerships and are not interested in creating, or growing a stronger infrastructure internally, and recognize that you can do that, with partners externally as well. And that also strengthens nonprofits.
Thank you very much, Kate, for this presentation. Is there any action that you need from this body, or is there any other ways that we as advisory body to the Board of County Commissioners and HSD can support in this effort?
Not at this point, but I'll definitely reach out to those entities of Brittany that were identified.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We have 4 minutes left in this meeting. Was there anybody who wanted to do public comment? If so, please raise your hand or say in the chat. Otherwise, I'd like to give the last couple minutes to Mayor Van Gordon, who wanted to do a jurisdictional update.
I have the 30-second jurisdictional update. The last couple of weeks, the Springfield City Council has been working on going through all of its housing projects and unhoused projects, and just seeing what's out there in the community, because there's a lot of dollars floating around, and we want to make sure that the things that are priorities for us, that we've got that we've actually got funding programmed to actually fund them. So I believe it is April 11th, we're going to have another work session about it, and hopefully we'll get some clarity around, hey, what are our priorities as far as projects go? What dollars do we have to put on the table? And I'm looking forward in April to sharing that list with you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. For the sake of the order, is there anything that people would like to address or have on the next agenda for the executive committee, or put forward for the main meeting next month?
Chair, I just have a quick one, which is that I noticed that we did not have time for the draft financial dashboard conversation. And so I'm hoping that'll make it onto the next agenda.
Okay, yes, ma'am. And are you asking for it to be at the executive?
I'm assuming that's where it needs. I mean, I don't have an opinion about that. But we tend to approve that right in the executive meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's fair. So we will move that to the executive agenda. We'll make sure it's prioritized for your request. Are there any other items? Commissioner Farr.
Negative, Chris. That hand is a ghost hand. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you very much. Staff, are there anything that we need to be noticing or paying attention to in the next month that that would need to be put on our next agenda? Hearing none.
Nothing out of the ordinary. Just really focused on education related to what does it mean to be a COC at the April all PHB meeting, and also added an update regarding capacity building and then making sure that there's time for all jurisdictions to report out are the notes I have.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your service and leadership, Kate and Steve and Lisa and Amanda and Danielle and Jenna and all of the Melissa and all the county staff for making this work possible. I would like to also thank Metro TV for hosting this and making sure it's broadcast. I believe it's on channel 29 and it does a cycle throughout the week. We're also available on the website. So this is a very important way to share this knowledge and show what the multi-jurisdictional body is doing in all parts of Lane County. So thank you everybody for being a membership of this, and please send any questions or comments to myself or Kate Budd about what we need to do or consider as we move forward. Have a wonderful day, and I call this meeting adjourned.